Welcome back to the deep dive. If you're like us, you want to get to the core of an idea, and fast. But you don't want a superficial overview.
Right.
You want those foundational insights, the aha moments that let you cut through the noise and start asking smarter questions.
And that's exactly our mission today.
We're giving you the ultimate shortcut to being well-informed on really any research topic by diving deep into the foundational concepts of research strategy.
And this is so essential because, people often mistake the tools for the whole blueprint. Our source today is this really dense but valuable stack of lecture notes on research methodologies in social and educational research.
Okay.
And the temptation is always to just focus on the tactics, the survey questions, the stats, the interview style. But our deep dive is all about the bigger picture.
The plan of action.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The plan that sits above all those little details and really dictates why the data was collected in the first place. We're getting past the foot soldiers and looking at the general strategy.
That's the perfect way to put it. So that's the core difference we're exploring. We want to know what a strategy actually is in this context, how a researcher decides which one to choose, and then we'll walk through three of the big ones.
The case study, the experiment, and ethnography.
The intense focus of the case study, the control of the experiment, and the immersion of ethnography. Okay, let's unpack this.
Let's do it.
So let's start at that blueprint level, defining strategy. I mean, the sources keep it pretty simple. They just call it a plan of action designed to achieve a specific goal.
It sounds simple, but to really get the weight of it, you have to look at where it came from, the military origin.
Right.
Think of strategy as the whole campaign. A general, isn't worried about the precise angle a soldier holds a rifle. That's a tactic.
That's a detail.
It's a detail. The general is looking at the map, planning troop movements, securing supply lines. They're focused on the overall objective, taking the city,
Right.
winning. The strategy is the macro plan.
I can see the application right away. I mean, not just in research, but in anything. If you spend all your time optimizing your email marketing tactics, but you don't have a clear strategy for who you're even trying to reach,
You'll be busy.
you'll be busy, but you won't be successful.
Precisely. And that concept, it just translates perfectly to social science research. A good research strategy needs three things. First, you need that overview of the whole project, the big picture.
A general's map.
The general's map. Second, you have to have a really rational, carefully constructed plan to tackle your research problem. And third, and this is crucial, you need a clearly articulated, achievable goal. What are you actually trying to find out? If the goal isn't clear, the strategy can't possibly be rational.
So just to lock that in for you listening, strategy is the high-level decision. Like we're going to understand remote learning by studying one specific community for a year. The methods, those are the tactics within that year.
Yeah.
The surveys, the interviews, the software.
The strategy guides the choice of methods. It's the container, and the methods are the tools you put inside. And if you pick the wrong container, the best tools in the world aren't going to save you.
Which brings us right to the next big question. How do you choose?
Well, this is where the researcher has to be really honest with themselves. They have to run their plan through a critical checklist of three key questions. Is it suitable? Is it feasible? And is it ethical?
Okay, let's take those one by one. Suitability. That just sounds like appropriateness, right?
It is. The justification for your choice has to link directly to the particular purpose you have.
So for instance, if your purpose is to find out, say, national voting intentions for 18 to 25-year-olds, a single deep case study of one college dorm room is interesting, maybe, but it's totally unsuitable for that goal.
Completely unsuitable. And suitability often just crashes right into feasibility, which is the brass tacks practical side of things.
Can you actually do it?
Can you actually do it? Can you get access to the data, to the specific people, to the documents that your strategy demands? You could design the most beautiful strategy to study a secretive corporation, but if they won't let you pass the lobby,
Your plan is dead in the water.
dead in the water.
That all makes logical sense. But here's where it gets, I think, really tricky. The human element, the ethics.
Right. Social research is about people, and the number one rule is minimizing harm. The sources lay out these standard measures that really form a contract with every single participant.
Yeah, it's non-negotiable.
Absolutely non-negotiable. This contract has 4 guarantees. First, anonymity. You protect their identity. Second, confidentiality. You protect their data. Third, they have to fully understand the research, the risks, what it all means.
Informed consent.
That's the fourth and most critical piece. They must voluntarily consent. If they feel pushed into it, or if they didn't really get the risks, that consent is invalid, it's meaningless.
Wait, can I push back on the anonymity thing just for a second?
Mm.
Because I know where we're going with ethnography. Say you're doing a case study on one tiny nonprofit or an ethnography in a really small, isolated community.
Mm-hmm.
Even if you don't use their names, the details you include might make it totally obvious who they are to anyone else in that group.
Mm-hmm.
How can you promise perfect anonymity there? Isn't that a tension in some of these strategies?
It absolutely is. You've hit on a core tension. In those high-context situations, a researcher often has to create what's called a composite sketch, or they have to anonymize the setting itself. Change place names, change institutional identifiers.
But you're masking more than just the person.
You have to. And the researcher must be upfront about the limits of true anonymity. They have to manage that expectation with the participant from the start, because you're right. Sometimes perfect anonymity is just practically impossible.
That's such a crucial complexity to grasp. It's not just a box you tick. It's a real tension you have to navigate. So these three, suitable, feasible, and ethical, they govern everything.
They do. Once those are satisfied, the researcher can move forward. Which brings us to the 3 different plans of attack you mentioned earlier.
Okay, let's start with case studies. The deep dive strategy. I know they get criticized for being narrow, but the sources show how powerful they can be. One definition calls it a specific instance that is frequently designed to illustrate a more general principle.
Right, and another way to think of it, and this description I think is the most powerful, is that a case study provides a unique example of actual people in actual situations. It helps readers understand ideas much more clearly than just abstract theories.
It makes it tangible. If you're reading about educational equity, a theory is one thing. But a detailed case study of one specific inner-city school, the actual students, the budget meetings, the teachers' struggles, that makes the concept real.
That's the main benefit. Case studies let a researcher deal with the subtleties, the intricacies of complex social situations by studying just one or a few instances. You sacrifice breadth, for sure. You can't generalize to a whole country.
But you get depth.
You get unparalleled depth and texture and nuance that no big survey could ever capture. It gives you the why behind the number.
Okay, so from that intense depth, let's pivot to our next strategy. The experiment.
A completely different world.
The goal here is control, isolation. The definition is pretty clear. You want to isolate individual factors and observe their effects in detail. You're either looking for new relationships or you're testing an existing theory.
And when we say a true experiment, we're talking about highly controlled manipulation of variables. The sources have this powerful, though ethically very controversial example from the Milgram experiments.
The shock experiments.
The shock experiments. The objective was so pure, experimentally speaking, to see how far a person will proceed in order to inflict increasing pain on a protesting victim. The goal was just to measure a specific behavior in a controlled situation.
That's the classic laboratory objective. But here's the rub, right? That level of control is incredibly difficult and often just forbidden in social science.
It's the major challenge. A true experiment needs you to manipulate the situation, control variables, and, this is key, randomly assign people to different conditions. And ethically, practically, you just can't randomly assign some kids to get a new, unproven curriculum and others to get one you know is failing just for experimental purity.
So if you can't randomize, which is the heart of a true experiment, what do? Do social scientists just give up?
No, they compromise.
Yeah.
Intelligently. They turn to what's called the quasi-experimental method. And what's so fascinating here is that this method, it relaxes those super strict requirements. And crucially, it shifts the entire philosophy. It moves the goal from proving strict cause-effect to establishing association between variables.
Okay, that distinction cause and effect versus association, that feels huge. Can you explain in simple terms why losing randomization forces that shift?
Sure. Think of it this way. To prove cause and effect, I have to be positive that nothing else could have created the difference between my two groups. And randomization is my best tool for that. If I can't randomize, say, I'm just studying 2 pre-existing classes at a school well, those 2 classes might already be different.
Right. Different teachers, different socioeconomic backgrounds, different motivation levels, confounding variables.
Exactly. So since those groups were pre-existing, I can only say that my intervention is associated with the change. The variables move together. But I can't definitively prove the cause because I didn't have the control to isolate my one variable.
So it's a compromise design. That's exactly what the sources call it. What does the researcher still get to control in this compromise?
They control the when and to whom of measurement. So they decide when to collect the data before, during, after, and who they're measuring. What they don't control is the when and to whom of exposure. The exposure to the variable, it already happened, or they couldn't randomly assign it. It's a compromise that makes research possible and ethical in the real world.
That is a phenomenal insight for you listening. If you read a study that says X is associated with Y, you now know that the researcher probably used a quasi-experimental strategy. They couldn't prove cause because full control was impossible or unethical.
It's the key to critically reading research.
Okay, that leaves our third major strategy, ethnography. And this feels like it's on a different planet from the experiment. The name itself is beautiful, literally a description of peoples or cultures.
And its roots are deep in social anthropology. Early researchers used it to create these detailed, permanent accounts of the lives and cultures of small, often isolated tribes. It's a strategy built not on control, but on deep, immersive observation, sometimes for years.
So what does that demand of the researcher? It's so much more than just sending out a survey.
It demands three major things. One, the researcher has to spend a lot of time in the field, weeks, months, even years, really integrating. Two, they have to pay special attention to the way the people they're studying see the world. You have to try and adopt their perspective, their logic.
And the third?
The third is that you have to acknowledge that the final account is more than just a description. It is, by definition, the researcher's interpretation, colored by their own immersion and experience.
That deep immersion, I mean, it must produce incredibly rich data. What's the main benefit? Why does it provide such powerful insights?
Well, because it's based on direct observation, you get what the sources call rich and wealthy data. But the key benefit, its ambition, is that it aims for holistic explanations.
Holistic.
Right. An experiment isolates two variables. Ethnography tries to connect everything. It focuses on the complex processes and relationships that are happening just beneath the surface. An ethnographer doesn't just note an action, they try to understand the entire cultural web that supports that action.
And unlike the quasi-experiment, it actually embraces the role of the researcher.
Yes, completely. It includes this open awareness that the researcher is part of the investigation. Their presence, how the group accepted or rejected them, that's all part of the data. It's a strategy that fundamentally values subjective richness over objective control.
So we've really covered the strategic map today.
We have. We started with what a strategy even is, that macro plan from the military blueprint, totally distinct from the tactical methods. Then we went through that crucial checklist. Is it suitable, feasible, and ethical? And finally, we dove into those three different plans of attack.
The case study, sacrificing breadth for that incredible nuanced depth.
The experiment and its compromise, the quasi-experiment, which trades strict cause and effect for association.
And finally, ethnography, the strategy of deep, holistic immersion.
Exactly.
So what does this all mean for you, the person navigating this flood of information every day? Understanding these strategies is your best critical thinking tool. When you see a new study or a press release, you can now get past the headline. You can ask, what kind of strategy did they use, and what kind of knowledge did that choice force them to ignore?
And this raises a really important question. We saw how strategies, especially the quasi-experiment, force a compromise, a shift from proving causality to just showing association. So if a researcher chooses any strategy, whether it's the narrow lens of a case study or the associated findings of a quasi-experiment, what kind of big picture knowledge is automatically placed outside the boundaries of their investigation, no matter how good their data is? That choice, the strategic choice, while it enables one kind of discovery, it's also building a wall around another. And that is something powerful to mull over as you explore information in the future.
That's a truly mind-expanding way to end. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the very foundation of how we create knowledge.
Yeah.
We hope this gave you the blueprint you need to start asking those deeper questions.
Until next time.